All right. Good afternoon, everyone. It's an incredible pleasure and honor to be here today. And Freke, I think before we kick off this fast-paced 50-minute interaction, it's going to be a fireside and a discussion live today. I think we want to start with your introduction, right? So to kick it off, you're the co-founder of Europe's first national program, a 650 million euro foundation, and you're director of ecosystem development. Yes. And the question, of course, well, yes, that's absolutely worthy of an applause. And she's been relentlessly advocating quantum, as I know, because we've worked really closely as well, but I'm also really interested, what does it mean to have such a function and role, and what does ecosystem mean in any place?
Yeah, so I have to say we were the second in Europe because the UK was still in Europe then.
Right, but yeah, so technically correct today, right? No, that's
technically
that's
correct
fair.
today. But yeah, so ecosystem development, that's really at the heart of our program and our philosophy. And it's, people say I'm leading the national initiative. I'm not. I wouldn't say that, because I'm facilitating and helping and enabling the ecosystem, and that's what it's all about. It's about the scientists, it's about the entrepreneurs, and to make sure that they can do what they're good at, and that is to innovate, develop technology, and build this quantum future together.
Right. Maybe as a follow-up, because again, we're going to do this a little bit interactive, maybe a little bit different than usual, but I mean, obviously what is on everyone's mind, as today there is not one or two national programs, there's 14, and hopefully, well, from my perspective, as an investment perspective, there's going to be 25. It's going to be more capital to go around to build foundational technology in companies. But how does that work from your perspective in terms of internationalization strategy, geopolitical structures, and maybe also friction here? So how does that work? So you have a national program, there's an international necessity and need to collaborate. How do you support such a paradox?
Yeah, I think this is an extremely important topic because, of course, this is a Dutch initiative. You have the French initiative. I think yesterday the Germans announced another big investment.
Right, 2.2 billion or something?
2.2 billion, and that's just great because we need as much investment in this space as possible. At the same time, there are restraints, and because this funding needs to flow in Dutch ecosystem, whereas the ecosystem has no boundaries, because scientists want to work together, and that's one of the key challenges I think we face, is to break down these barriers to internationalize. And I think one of the worries that I have is that the geopolitical tensions that we see increasing, and also, well, this morning Herman Hauser talked about tech sovereignty and European sovereignty, and it's all understandable, and I think it's important, but at the same time we need to collaborate, and the only way to build an economy and to build an ecosystem and an industry is to create supply chains that are interdependent. So I think we as a community, as we're sitting here today, should make more noise to keep that to convey that message across. Because if we build walls in Europe or in nation states, this technology will not scale. Right.
Okay, fair enough. And so maybe to double down on this. So okay, a boundaryless system, right? And then so on the one side, I think the importance is pretty clear, because I think you and I might both agree. But of course, the question to you, like, if we don't act now, and I'm looking at Europe, and hopefully can include Europe and the UK in this conversation as well today, is we're facing the risk of turning into a resource economy, or even worse, tourist economy, right? And quantum seems to be one of the things that we're good at, but there's an inherent risk that we might, or maybe some say we've already
lagged behind.
Right.
Yeah, because that's what they call the European paradox. We are great at science, we are great at building the first steps of a technology, but then when it scales, when it's commercialized, well, we're here at the commercialization event, then we lag behind. And that's why it's so important that, for instance, in our initiative, we also have the startup support and the investment part, and that's where you come into play. So I want to shift the focus to you. Tom is leading the Quantum Delta NL participations. That's an investment vehicle, and Infinity, which is the startup support. So tell me a bit about what you're doing.
Well, I think inherently, when we first connected, 3 or 4 years ago, we talked about what is the most impactful thing we can do in order to support and generate not only building companies for the sake of building companies. It's not about the numbers game here, although in the end it is. We need much more companies created in order to create some sizable outcomes. But also, what can we do? And there's a lot of things that already exist in the economy, right? So there's incubators, accelerators, and I don't want to say everything is bad, but I can say they're not optimal, and definitely not optimized for research-led organizations. So while I think what we set out to build is a support program currently supporting more than 100 research groups in the way that it's agnostic, it's free of charge, obviously, and it's really there to pick up the technology that is laying on the shelves literally today with brilliant scientists and give them the right ways to move forward. And not in an incremental European way, I would say, but let's take the best elements that we have today that exist already, across the Atlantic and build sizable companies,
okay.
With profitable with balance sheets that work, with the ability to acquire other organizations as well, and with maybe a little bit more boldness and ambition.
And you say it's not about numbers, but just for reference, how many companies do we have in Europe, in the Netherlands, in this field?
Well, I mean, also we just launched an open source dashboard that you can all access with the same data and to benchmark it as well. And so welcome you to do that. But I mean, essentially, we're currently tracking around 275 companies in Europe, out of which 8% actually resides in the Netherlands right now. And if you take France, you're at 13%. But the bottom line of the story is, whilst we have the research force, and actually everyone acknowledges this, we have the talent, we have the companies being created, the value of these companies is just increasing incrementally, which should technically increase exponentially, at least compared to some of our peers. So just take, for example, France and the Netherlands combined, the total value invested at 350 million. If you would take the US stake there and put that on top, that's 4.5 billion. That's more than a 10x in capital increase. And so that is, I think, something we can optimize, and that is something we cannot optimize with just non-dilutive funding based on grants and subsidies, but we need something else in place, and hopefully we can be a small part of that something else to support these companies and to grow.
Okay, so you say there's capital needed to fund these European companies to scale.
Absolutely, and there's also something, and again, I'm not saying that this it's done on purpose or with malintent, but what happens is also on the spin-out phase. I mean, if you look at the numbers, the data is actually, it's excruciating. 95% of all spin-outs never reach 10 people of staff or more, or they slowly essentially start to phase out, whereas this is not a technology issue. It's very much also a team issue and a team concern. And so what happens right now is we support these companies with grants. And by the way, please, European Commission, keep it coming, right? We need much more. 22 billion in 2022, 15 billion in the 10 years before, totals 35, hopefully 35 more. But it's not going to be enough. We need the ability for these teams to hire the CFOs and the talent, also put the business proposition in place and the longer-term vision. And grants just don't do that. They provide you with a cost center, but not the structure to operate with freedom and to build a strategy on top of that. So, and yeah, honestly, that is, I think, our biggest challenge is, where do we find these funds? And so that's, I think, why I'm personally happy today to talk to another specialist, deep tech or quantum fund, is that we see the rise of these specialist investment vehicles. Because quantum obviously is not a single field or area. So, it already took us 4 years to get set up, and now since we incorporated last year to make the first 5 investments, it's an innately difficult field, right? So we should seek to find a way to de-risk, or let's say, I would almost arguably sometimes say we should find a way to create these uninvestable ideas, these brilliant uninvestable ideas, and make it into sustainable business by bridging or de-risking, I would say, the gap between technical founders and non-technical capital. Yeah. And it starts at the beginning and not when the companies are already big, because in fact the companies will never grow to large sizes. And
when we get to the beginning, that's something we work very hard at, because there's also at the beginning there's some fundamental issues that these founders encounter when they want to spin off out of universities. And it was already mentioned this morning as well, the negotiations about IP, the shareholders' rights that the universities want to get in these companies. In Europe, it's not founder-friendly enough. And that's something we are working very strongly and in the Netherlands, but also we hope to connect with the whole of Europe and the UK to make that better. Because if these companies, if you are already burned out because you have such a hard negotiation with the university, you can't scale.
Right, I mean, negotiations sometimes take 2 years. And again, it's not an individual complaint towards the university, but yeah, that single lawyer who works at that firm and that single investment manager who has, unfortunately, also probabilistically a very low salary, what is his or her incentive to really support these companies? And by the way, the university enables them to support hundreds of companies at the same time, so they can't really cherry pick the winners out of here. So, but then, in our perspective, the technology is just already there and it's just waiting to be commercialized, or not commercialized, sorry, in the case of quantum, but it's waiting to be explored. And this is something, but it has to be a collective effort, right? So on IP, you know, you're working on that as well. I know, you know, tirelessly. I think hopefully it could be more of a European effort as well to standardize such a thing.
And one other thing feel very passionate about is shared facilities, because a lot of these companies, deep tech companies, they need clean rooms. They need equipment that is so expensive that they can't buy it in these early years of their startup journey. And you see IQM, for instance, in Finland, they managed to get all the funds to have their own clean room, but that's not all the companies are there yet. And so that's why we are also investing in, for instance, pilot lines for, so not university clean rooms or national lab clean rooms, but private clean rooms that these companies can use. And it's open for the whole of Europe.
Yeah, I think, I mean, honestly, if you look at the House of Quantum now, the place that you build right now in Delft, I think it was, you know, booked out, and there's a waiting list right now for international companies to sign up. But I think it's incredibly important. And again, you know, the ideal scenario would be that also science realize and recognize, which I think they're starting to do more and more, that if, let's say, something is invented and it works and the process can be replicated, it just makes sense to hand it over to, you know, the private sector and then repeat, you know, rinse and repeat and get the technology back in. But yeah, capital constraints keep us from moving fast, I would say, right?
And when you look ahead, like 10 years ahead, of course, there's a lot of talk about quantum winter, hype, but also maybe the geopolitical or economical situation. What is your view? What is our journey ahead?
Well, the next 10 years, I mean, I think 10 years is not enough to predict the total and the full outcome or the aspect of it. But what I can say, I mean, I'm incredibly excited to see that I feel that we're. And by the way, I don't want to talk in terms of hype or winter because it doesn't really matter. You know, good companies arise from any time. But you know, today and actually this moment, this year, in fact, is a time to invest because we've seen a decrease in birth rate of companies. We know that the best technology has not been spinned out yet, right? So actually, we're going to see this, you know, the coming 2 to 3 years, some companies emerging. Which means that, you know, by hopefully 10 years from now, at the very minimum, we have an infrastructure and industry that is much more sizable and also much more mature than today that can effectively, hopefully, tackle some of the problems that we're facing. Right? It's not a clear-cut bet yet, though.
Yeah. Yeah. To me, it's like winter. It's about some things you can't influence, but you can influence your own resilience, your own strength. And my feeling is that this technology, it's such foundational, and we've been on the journey for a long time already, and we're here for the long haul.
Yeah. Cool. And I think we have time. I think we do have time for one question from the audience. If there's any questions from the audience, I'm not sure if there are, but let me see. No, I think Freek, and then there we go. So we talked about internationalization, we talked about IP strategy, but we haven't talked about technology itself. So do you think we actually have everything we need to create an infrastructure on actual companies that create sustainable value? Not saying that we should take an example of ASML. On the other hand, you know, ASML is a success that took 35 years to build. Do you see that as a possibility in the next, let's say, 10 to 15 years?
Well, yeah, definitely. So ASML, of course, it was discussed here this morning as well. Oh. It's our lighthouse company, and we take a lot of lessons from how that journey went. And if you see what's popping up in the ecosystem, companies that are popping up, I mean, there is opportunity to create 1, 2, or more of that kind of companies in this field. And it's hard to predict which one. It's also hard to predict which part of the technology. There's talk about you have to build a full stack, or is it better to build components? And I think the jury is still out. And also, as an ecosystem believer, so to say, I think you should not steer it top down. It's something that emerges, and you can back the winners, as the Dutch government did with ASML as well. So yeah, but I'm optimistic, and it's also, of course, our North Star to build the next ASML.
Cool, I think that's all the time we have. I just want to thank you so much, Freek. Thank you everyone for taking the time. Give her a big round of applause. Freek Heijman.
And Tom.